So I wanted to talk a little bit about my family and my background, not because I want to particularly, um, but because I feel like people are probably going to ask, and I'd like to preempt any assumptions or things that might come up and explain in any way that I find is necessary. I said that I came from two privileged families, and that's true. My mother is Iranian, my father is white. I grew up in a life in a community surrounded by interesting upper middle class, sometimes upper class friends and family members. Some of my family members were extraordinarily wealthy. Most were in that upper middle class section. We were solidly middle class. My dad had a great job. My mother raised 3 kids. We had a certain amount of family money, given that my mother's family was a very socially influential upper class Iranian family, up until the revolution, but that's another story. Never mind. Anyway, sorry. My father also very upper class WASP family. But we ourselves were never rich. On a day-to-day basis, money was an issue. I couldn't go on class trips because they were too expensive. My mom worried all the time because she didn't have an income and she couldn't buy a lot of groceries for us. My bank account was zero for most of my teenage and 20s and college years. I always worked. I always had a job because otherwise I didn't eat. My mother left New York, which is where I grew up. I didn't specify that. When I was 18 and I went to college. So from that point on, any money that I needed to live was money that I worked for. My dad, however, let me also say that my dad paid for college, which was incredible. I took out a few $1,000s of student loans, but that was about it. So it was this real dichotomy of extraordinary privilege and also not oblivious to the fact that money was hard to come by. I spent years where I would only eat at the restaurant that I was working at because I could have the staff meals. And then life happened. Luck, fortune, destiny, whatever you want to call it. But my grandmother, my mother's mother, moved back to Iran around 2005. And she was able to pick up the artwork that she had done in the 70s, which was a very specific type of artwork, a mirror mosaics, and find her craftsmen, to reignite her artistic career. And it burned. No, sorry, in a good way. It inflamed. She she became incredibly successful, and well known. And her commercial success at the age of, 80 something allowed a lifestyle for me and my mom and my aunt and my cousins and my brothers that would not have been possible in any other timeline or situation. And as such, when I had a young child, when my first child was around 1 or 2, I took over managing my grandmother's estate. There was no, she was, again, 80-something-year-old Iranian woman. There's no database, no records of her work, all that kind of stuff. And it allowed me to also be a full-time stay-at-home parent to both of my kids for the first 3 years of their life. I spent all day, every day with them until they were 3. Each of them was 3 and went to school, but let's be honest, even then, school was part-time. It ends at 2:30. It's ridiculous. What world is this? But it was incredible, and I have been doing that for, whatever that's been now, 9 years. And that work is what has allowed me to have this nice apartment, to have the space and the energy and the flexibility to raise my kids, and to now start something new. So that's why this is happening now. That's why I'm able to do this. And hilariously, I should also point out that my mom's biological father, this guy right here, his paintings also became commercially successful posthumously, as well. They had a hilariously parallel lives. I know, I digress, but it's kind of funny because they were both, had some success as artists they were married in the 50s, had some success then, my mom was born in 1950, so they were married around then, had some artistic success, in the 60s and 70s. They were divorced early on, like 1954 or something. My grandmother remarried, moved back to Iran, religion. And they both lived within 10 blocks of each other on the Upper West Side. They also both had houses out in the Hamptons where I would spend my summers and, weekends as a kid. And now all 3 of my grandfathers, my dad's father, my mom's father, and my mom's biological father, are buried in the same cemetery in Sag Harbor. And my dad's mother is also buried there, and my mom's grandmother has a little plaque there. She's buried in Iran, but has a little thing there. And a cousin too. Just shout out to them. So he didn't want to sell any of his paintings after the 70s, so he never did. But they both died within 6 months of each other in 2019, in their late 90s. And then his children, my uncles, started selling his work after his death, and he also became pretty commercially successful. So there it is. I have 2 Iranian artist grandparents who those paintings and artwork sell for quite a bit of money. And that is another aspect of my privilege. Okay. I mean, that doesn't cover everything, but I feel like that's a